everyone, welcome to this video 6 of 10, and we're gonna talk about project lifecycle. Now, what is project lifecycle? A project will always go, a project lifecycle is basically the series of phases that a project passes through from its initiation to its closure. And that means that different projects might have different number of phases or different names to those phases. And it will depend because, what type of project it is, what is the type of control system we use. But phases are typically sequential, which means that one comes after the other, and normally they're focused on a set of deliverables. In other words, on a set of things that we must deliver by the end of the project. So typically the phases we go through, there's a couple of phases that are the same for every project and others that are different, correct? The first one you see over there is called project initiation, and this is the very first phase. This is when basically the project is still being defined. We are creating the contract for the project. The team is not even assembled yet, okay? Now, throughout the videos that I will make, I'm going to go through each one of these phases and explain to you what tools or what things that you need to know for each one of them. So after project initiation comes the part of planning and organization. All right, so here we plan the whole project and we're going to create the phases that come afterwards. Now, obviously, like I said before, it will depend a lot on the project. Some projects might require many more phases, others very little. And that's why afterwards you see I put 3 phases and I call them project execution, all of them. But we could also call them phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. And it will really depend on the project we have. But in the future, I'm going to have a video about how to divide your project into phases and how many phases normally you need. Okay. At the end of the very last phase, at the end of the very last phase that you plan, you have the project closure, and I put it here as well as a phase. And on project closure, basically, well, we close the project and we take care of all the things that we need to close the project. For example, bank accounts that must be closed, people that must be redirected back to the other projects, and so on. Now, the level of effort in all of this is very different. Project initiation does not require much effort yet, but as the planning goes by, more and more effort is required. During project execution really is when you're working the most, and then during project closure, you're working less and less. So there's 2 different ways of dealing with projects in that sense, and we're gonna study, or my videos will be mostly focused on what we call the predictive project lifecycle. I call it traditional project management because it's the one that traditionally is mostly done. Traditionally, not because, we've been doing it for many years, but more on the sense that most projects work better with this one. So predicted project lifecycle, and I put this crystal ball here, is the fact that you have to predict the future, right? So it's very plan driven, this methodology, and means that your scope, your schedule, and your resources, you plan them right at project initiation. And your deliverables will be categorized into logical phases, and like I was explaining before, we divide the project into phases, and each phase has an objective to be met. And our detailed plan is prepared for each phase before the beginning of every phase, before the beginning of the whole project, right? And therefore, we have a high-level plan for the whole project, but normally the detailed plan we start at the end of each phase for the next phase. Adaptive project cycle is more like you have to adapt as the project goes because you cannot plan it all in advance for a variety of reasons. And I like to compare this one to surfing because you have to constantly adapt to the new reality that is coming. Not that I know how to surf, but I see how they do it. So this one is a very change-driven life cycle, which means that there's a lot of changes through the project, so you cannot plan everything ahead. So you set at the very beginning what is the vision of the project, but scope, schedule, and cost, they will stay very ambiguous because you cannot define them yet. At the end of each phase, you define and you plan what the next phase will be. And here there's a very high degree of stakeholder interaction because otherwise you cannot really know if you're going the right direction. So to summarize, indeed, we divide the project into many phases. The way we divide will depend a lot on the type of project. But at the end, there's 2 main ways. Either you plan everything ahead, all right, which we call it, which is the traditional project management, or you can only plan 1 phase at a time. Whatever way it is, The important thing is that you are at least planning the next steps that your project must take to ensure its success. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below.